Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining today's event. My name is Jessica Utiki, and I am the head of the Global Distributors Collective, or GDC. Today, we'll be exploring the state of the last mile distribution sector, where we are now, how the sector has evolved, and what support is needed to really unlock scale. The GDC is hosted by Practical Action alongside our strategic and implementing partner, Bopping. This event and the State of the Sector 2025 report that we're launching has been made possible thanks to the support of UK aid under the Transforming Energy Access platform. Before we begin, I'd like to extend an enormous thank you to all the contributors and authors of the report, and especially to the GDC team who have worked tirelessly to bring this all together. So, here's what to expect today. So first, we'll present the findings of the State of the Sector report. We'll be highlighting progress and impacts since the last edition in 2022. And then we'll move into breakout groups where you'll be able to choose the topic that most interests you. These groups will be informal spaces to chat, share experience, and ask questions. We do have a jam-packed session today, so there won't be a formal Q&A at the end, but please do use the chat, and members of our team will be ready to respond as we go along. So we are also delighted to be joined by a fantastic lineup of speakers who bring real depth of experience from the field. So we've got Habiba Ali, the CEO of Sosai Renewable Energies Company, Kudzi Chitiva, the CEO of Natfort Energy, and Joyce Sikweze, country manager and co-founder of Green Impact Technologies. You'll also hear from my wonderful teammates at the GDC, May Joy, Cynthia Davinia, and Ambrose. Now you know who you are going to be hearing from. It would be good to know who we have in the room. So it's really great. You'll see a poll up in front of you. If you can just take a couple of seconds to let us know what type of organization you're representing today. If you're just joining us now, we're just completing a poll to see who we've got in the room. Give everyone a couple more seconds to fill that out. Okay, shall we share the results now? Okay, so it's nice to see that we've got a lot of GDC members in the room, and hopefully at the end of this, a few non-GDC members that will join the GDC. Great to also see some TA providers, donors, and manufacturers. Okay, so let's get started. Next slide, please. So this is the third state of the sector report. In 2019, we mapped out the last mile distribution sector for the very first time. Then in 2022, we reported in the aftermath of COVID, which had reshaped the sector in profound ways. Now in 2025, we see a sector that has weathered new challenges from climate shocks to currency devaluations, yet, as you'll see today, continues to adapt and grow. So the report focuses on kind of three big trends. You'll see these figures again throughout the program today. The first one here is around market creation. LMDs continue to be a critical bridge to essential products and services for low-income customers. And to give you a sense of who they're reaching, 67% of customers live on less than $3.20 a day. 78% of those customers are rural and 2/3 are women. Secondly, there are financing challenges. So access to finance has become much harder compared to 2021. LMDs receiving grants fell by 40%, debt by 54%, and equity by over 75%. Despite this and the headwinds, 61% of LMDs actually grew revenues between 2021 and 2023. We'll also be exploring today what successful LMDs do that set them apart, what their aspirations are for the future, and what support they need to get there. So why does this matter? Given that most of you are already in this room today, I'm not going to run through the figures, but as we all know, the access gap remains enormous. So this gap undermines progress on SDGs, the climate resilience, and gender equality. Families facing these challenges are often the hardest to reach in remote, low-income, and crisis-affected areas. Whilst public infrastructure is essential, it's slow and costly to roll out. So for many households, the fastest way to close the gap is by building markets that deliver beneficial products affordably and at scale, from solar lights and clean cook stoves to water filters and agricultural tools. And that's where last mile distributors come in. These are organizations whose core business is the distribution of beneficial products to underserved consumers. This report draws on insights from more than 100 distributors, plus interviews from a range of different stakeholders and a literature review to provide the clearest picture yet of the role, challenges, and opportunities in the sector. With that, I'll now hand over to my colleague May Joy, who will introduce the GDC membership.
Thank you, Jess. Hey, everyone. Yes, I'll be taking us through the GDC membership, and the information that you see on your screen is from the members who completed the survey. So it's a sample from the entire membership, which currently stands at 250 last mile distributors. So this data reflects the voices and experiences of 115 of our members who are serving underserved communities. So I'll start with product offerings. Some of the product offerings of GDC members are solar lights and home systems, covering 75%. Members also offer clean cooking products and fuels, agricultural inputs, and even health and nutrition products. And one thing that I took out from this is that this study confirms there is strength in diversifying product categories, because a whole 89% of GDC members sell more than one product category. And moving on to geography, from the survey, our members operate across 58 countries with strong representation in Africa. East Africa coming in first at 38%, followed by West Africa, West and Central Africa, and Southern Africa, both regions at 20%. And it's important to note that we have a growing footprint in Asia, the Pacific, Latin America, and the Caribbean. And also 15% of our members now operate across multiple regions, just reflecting how ambitious last mile distributors are with the potential to scale their operations. In terms of markets, what's really striking about our membership from this study is how deeply GDC members are immersed in their markets. For example, 86% provide after-sale services and 72% offer consumer financing. I think these are two essential services that ensure access to the beneficial products they sell reach the right communities. And also, last mile distributors operate under very tough environments, as we'll see shortly. Majority of mainstream businesses don't go where they go or put a huge amount of effort to reach the low-income communities. So it's interesting to see that GDC members have been operating for more than 8.5 years. And this just shows how resilient they are and truly committed to their communities. And in terms of company ownership and leadership, we are proud that 88% of GDC members are locally owned companies who mostly shares whose shares are mostly held by citizens of the countries where they work, and 93% are locally led, meaning that nationals are CEOs or managing directors steering the organizations. So this is an important thing because it shows that solutions are driven by the people who understand their communities and are also part of the same communities. And then regarding impact, collectively, the GDC members have reached an average of 215,000 people. Most of these customers are among the hardest to reach, with 65% living below $3.2 a day, and 78% are in rural areas. So the products that they sell truly go where they are needed the most. So GDC members use a range of channels to reach their customers. For example, 67% use more than one channel to distribute their products, and some of the channels include direct to consumers or through sales agents, a very common way of distributing, standing at 88%. We have retailers. We also have partnering with organizations like schools, health centers, religious institutions, and others, currently at 37%. And finally, I'd like to say that our community supports distributors globally so they can save time and money. And these insights remind us how strong we are when we come together. So if you're on the call today or when you watch this recording later and your company fits what GDC members are doing, we would love to welcome you into our community. Membership is free, and I'll share the link in the chat. Thank you. I now welcome our Senior Program Officer, Cynthia, to take it from here.
Thank you, Mayjoy. So just to look at the first trend, we are going to look at market activation. So on market activation, we see that last mile distributors continue to play a very critical role when it comes to market activation. So the quadrant basically summarizes how the distributors go about doing this. These companies operate on the fringes of established commercial markets. When it comes to creating trust and demand for these beneficial products, they use sales agents, non-governmental organization partnerships, and below-the-line marketing techniques. These sales agents then use techniques such as door-to-door sales, product demos. They also get to partner with NGOs and engage the community. 68% of our members indicated that they use door-to-door channels often. Then the main target are female customers with a gender-inclusive workforce. So this groundwork then attracts other market players such as informal traders and pay-as-you-go companies. When these companies are faced with competition, they tend to pivot, opening up new geographies, new product categories, and underserved customer segments. In a nutshell, their role is a public good, creating demand and confidence in beneficial products that wouldn't otherwise take root. And because of this, we actually consider them impact all-stars as they get to reach the hard-to-reach customers with these beneficial products. So who do these LMDs reach? These companies serve a higher proportion of customers who have low incomes and live in remote or rural areas as compared to other companies within the off-grid and agricultural sectors. So based on the data that we collected, 67% of their customers live on less than $3.2 per day, and 78% of their customers are from the rural areas. This is in comparison to 50% within the wider off-grid energy sector. Then we also see 66% of their customers are women, which is twice the sector's average, and 44% serve refugee and host communities. A very good example of this is in Uganda's refugee camps. We see women-led companies like Fena Solar and Wana Energy Solutions who deliver clean energy and cook stoves despite the high affordability and financing challenges that they get to experience. The other thing that we've also seen is that many of these customers are first-time buyers, with 70 to 90% of the LMD's customers indicating that they were purchasing solar systems or water filters for the first time. Using PowerLive as an example, which is a women-led social enterprise that distributes off-grid solar products, as well as productive use of energy products within the rural areas of Zimbabwe, they actually found out that 90% of their customers are purchasing a solar home system for the first time. So right now, we are gonna jump into understanding why we call them, or rather we refer to them as Impact All-Stars, and you'll see a poll pop up on your screen. So let's see what percentage you think these companies are either locally owned or women owned. So we can have 10 minutes for this. What do you think is the percentage of GDC members that are locally owned and women owned? It would be interesting to see what you think are the numbers and why you actually think we consider them Impact All-Stars. So 2 more seconds. Okay, so we can get to see the responses as well as what the numbers are. Okay, so majority of you actually got it right at 88% are locally owned and 47% are women owned. So these LMDs stand out for who they are in as much as who they serve. They provide local solutions to the hard-to-reach customers. So as we see there, 88% are actually locally owned, and 47 of them are women-owned, and they are proven to reach poorer and more female customers. So this then makes them Impact All-Stars. Their workforce as well reflects this, as women make 50% of their staff, 57% of them are sales agents, and 56 are within the senior and middle management level. So this is far higher than the energy sector access on average. Okay, so when we combine them, we see that collectively they are indeed mighty, because from the 114 GDC members that we surveyed, they've collectively reached 24.5 million people to date. Averaging this, it comes to about 215,000 customers each. These members have over 1,700 employees working for them and 14,000 sales agents across the GDC membership. When we look at the products and the volumes of sales that they have made, in 2023, we see that they sold nearly 900,000 solar products, 469,000 cook stoves, and 273,000 wash products, playing a very significant role in the market share. In terms of how the LMDs offer their services, they sell primarily through sales agents so that they can demonstrate the products in person. And when they do this, they get to build trust and also create demand. 70% of the sales have actually come through the sales agents. These distributors don't work alone, by the way. We see that 37% of the LMDs work with trusted community partners, such as NGOs, schools, and clinics, which then help them build this demand that they are looking for. These distributors ensure their marketing techniques are targeted, local, and below the line, reaching audiences directly through personalized, trusted, and measurable strategies rather than traditional mass media advertising. As trust in and demand for technologies grow, these last mile distributors typically see increased competition from informal retailers and traders selling low-cost, non-quality verified products, as well as vertically integrated companies offering higher tier products with pay-as-you-go financing. And now to hear from one of our Impact All-Stars, Habiba from Sosai will share with us her experience on how they managed to enter a new area and create a market, as well as any recommendation that she may have on how last mile distributors can play this market creation and activation role more effectively. Over to you, Habiba.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cynthia. Thank you, everyone on the call. So for us at SOSE, it's been a journey traveling this last mile distribution aspect of our business. Our business was set up in a way to ensure that people in rural communities had access to reliable, efficient, and technology aligned solutions. It's not just about providing the solutions, it's about providing solutions that actually ensure that the people who use them have a better quality of life. And we like to say generally that at SOSE, we're doing business for the good of society. So today, talking about some of the things that has ensured that when we're entering new communities, we do our work efficiently. It is all in the access to finance. Some of the major things that we always see as the first step is to ensure that there is access to finance, to ensure that there is a way that when I say access to finance, it's not just to us as a distributor, it's also to ensure that our customers are, getting access to these solutions in an affordable way. So that is why you find us using a lot of pay-as-you-go models, and this actually reduces that barrier. But one of the things that we've had to innovate when it comes to pay-as-you-go, because in the beginning, when we were doing pay-as-you-go just anyhow, one of the things we suffered the most was a lot of default payments. So what we had to do was innovate around the pay-as-you-go solutions. First, we were giving people a longer term, but we had to come down and use lower periods of repayment. At a point, we also had a situation where every product was a long-term payment, but with time, we're able to innovate alongside that. We understood that for smaller solutions, you pay that shorter period, and then it's only when you're able to make good of your name that we then can add you more products, or actually allow you a longer term of payment, and so you can pay back in time. Another thing that really helped us is that we were very persistent and we were very adaptable. When I say persistent, we never went back. We never wanted to run away from what was facing us. It was very painful at a point when we started the business and we're doing only sales by cash and letting the women to help us sell solutions, and we were not selling pay-as-you-go. It was okay. The women ensured that they gave it only to neighbors who were not notoriously defaulters. But with time, when we started doing pay-as-you-go and we thought this could help us achieve scale, we got beaten a lot, and then we had to come back. But that didn't stop us. We kept going, but we were able to adapt to ensure that we stayed committed over the years, and that we also ensured that ultimately we built the community's trust while also ensuring we also trusted them. It's very important. It's a two-way street. We made sure that we focused a lot on the women's empowerment bit of our business. We had strong partnerships with people. We started learning, with time. I mean, we've been 15 years in the business, so it meant going back to the drawing table. And up till now, we go back to the drawing table. At GDC, we had an event at the end of April, or it was a March. And I remember telling Ambrose how there were so many things I learned that I hadn't known about in all my years of business, So some of the challenges that we've had to face, like I said, is also access to finance as well, which is both on getting the financing to do this pay-as-you-go solutions is really one of the most difficult things. And also ensuring that we also pay back our loans and debts has been a very big problem for us when we collected the first set of, say, pay-as-you-go solutions, and we had to take loans to pay for that. At that same time, there was a swift change in the market in Nigeria where the Forex situation really went nosedive. So the Naira rose from about 400 Naira to the dollar, and became like 1,200. So that affected our repayment times, that affected a lot of things. So our funders, we became like constantly begging to be given time. And somehow, I say again, we also had to adapt and remain in the business somehow. At first, most of these communities find it very hard when you're working to trust you to ensure that you are doing this business for their own sake. So one of the things that we do is that we build the trust through awareness, being friends with them. Luckily, we work in rural Nigeria, rural northern Nigeria, where we speak the language. And I ensure, even when I'm recruiting, I'm always thinking, do you speak Hausa, which is like the lingua franca in the north? And then we also make sure that we also have a few benefits and perks for being our customers. I mean, it could be as little as a key holder. People like the fact that you're willing to give them something, and in the long run, they are also working to help you. Another challenge that we had was in the beginning, at least, but now it's getting better with the involvement of the Rural Electrification Agency in Nigeria, highly working very well to smooth things for us. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Somebody should have said since. Sorry, I'll just.
No problem, Habiba. I hate to do this, but would you be able to wrap things up in the next 30 seconds?
Yeah, I'll just wrap things up. I'm so sorry. Somebody just mentioned about the fan. But yeah, Abuja is very hot and I was using the fan, but I'm sorry. So the policy barriers actually were some of the barriers that we faced, operational challenges going into the communities. And so going forward, what we would like is a more community-centered approach. We will also have inclusive business models. And finally, strengthening women entrepreneurs, reducing import barriers, and de-risking finance will make last mile distributors the true engines of market creation. Thank you very much. And I apologize for the fan. I just saw the message now.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Habiba. And you've teed us up quite nicely, talking about your journey of growth and resilience despite all the economic headwinds that you've had to face over the last 15 years. So, as I mentioned in the introduction, the last couple of years have been extremely tough for last mile distributors. The operating environment has been shaped by overlapping shocks. So climate change has brought more frequent and severe disasters, compounding macroeconomic and political changes. Inflation and currency devaluation, as we've just heard, has forced companies to raise prices, just as customers' purchasing power was falling. In Malawi, for example, the kwacha lost nearly 70% of its value in just over 18 months. And a very similar thing has happened in Nigeria. Add to that political instability, droughts, cyclones, and floods have eroded incomes, and all while access to finance has become much harder as grants were cut and investors turned more risk averse. As one member told us, margins disappeared overnight, so it's become mathematically impossible to survive unless you have very deep pockets. Next slide, please, Cynthia.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kudzi. I'm the CEO of Natfort Energy. So I'm going to share our experiences on resilience and growth through diversification. So Natfort Energy is a player in the LMD sector, and we distribute solar home systems and also solar for productive use products to various segments of the community. In addition, we've set up an EPC business unit offering various C&I services to businesses. So initially, Natfort, was sort of like a social enterprise, born for profit. We're distributing solar home systems mainly through the pay-go business model. And we're predominantly being supported by grants, right? So when the grants started to dry out, we then realized that, going commercial is very difficult. We accessed a couple of debt facilities, but it was very difficult, obviously, to see the path to profitability given the market that we're servicing, which is that of the poor. What then happened is we had pivot, right? So we started exploring higher tier products, higher tier energy products. And then we introduced some higher tier energy products. And then we also set up our C&I business unit. What that did for our business is that we saw our margins grow. It had a positive effect on our bottom line. And then we also saw our revenues increase. So really, you will find that with the smaller systems that we sold, it was very difficult, to get your money back. But because we introduced these higher tier products, obviously now targeting customers who could actually pay for the product, we actually saw that having a positive impact on our bottom line. So really, we had to follow a carefully thought out process. We had to, assess our internal capacity. We had to look at the market outlook and obviously our ability to mobilize resources. So that really gave us sort of like the pathway to pretty much decide the kind of product segments and the kind of market segment that we're targeting. So just maybe one lesson for the LMDs to sort of like adopt the same. So I would say, you just need to look at your mission and your vision and see that the way you're diversifying is to, staying true to the cause. But, I believe that, whatever extra revenue, whatever extra dollar that you, add to your revenue is, is worth it. It's worth pursuing as long as it helps you to sort of like meet your aspirations, like for instance, to service the poor. So I'm just going to touch a bit on the role of government and possibly partners. So I believe here governments and especially development partners have a huge role to play. This could be by providing tax breaks or by providing duty exemptions. In the country that I come from, Zimbabwe, we are still seeing some products having, large amounts of duty, which then defies the purpose. We're trying to sell these products at the minimal cost possible. But then, some of these products are levied high duties, which becomes very difficult. So this is really one of the areas that I believe development partners, given their will to governments, can really support on. Then lastly, I'll touch on policy and financing. So really, from a policy perspective, it would be great to have more subsidies in these areas. And, in terms of financing, if we're looking at commercial financing, for instance, we need more patient capital. Grant funding is still relevant, although I think you've heard from the presentation that, grant funding is just fading away. It's so much difficult to access grants these days, but it is still relevant for us to be able to fulfill our cause. And from the recently completed project that we did, we're also seeing that result-based financing is very helpful, and it's a way that we can really help LMDs to distribute these products to the marginalized communities. And then lastly, we've got what we call PayGo 2.0, which is sort of like a new way of thinking in as far as approaching this PayGo business is concerned. It's really just adopting a more customer-centric approach towards our service delivery. I saw Willem is here, so if you want to know more about that, you'll be able to tell you. So yeah, that's pretty much it from NatFort Energy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kudzi. And so nice that you've come in and shown how you've adapted and changed some of what you're doing to stay commercial because of the shocks that have happened in the environment. So back in our 2022 State of the Sector report, we introduced two broad archetypes of LMDs: dedicated sales force models, which were characterized by full-time agents selling a wide range of products across a large area. They tend to have a high risk appetite and growth ambitions, and local livelihood models, which train village-level entrepreneurs to sell a narrow set of beneficial products in their communities. So although our membership is very diverse and remains hard to categorize, our latest data set suggests that this distinction does still hold, with companies earning more than 500 million in revenue tend to resemble the dedicated sales force model, while companies with less than 500,000 in revenues tend to resemble the local livelihoods model. So segmenting companies by revenue shows that those above $500,000 grew by 26% in 2023, while those below the threshold saw a 7% decline. So if we move on to this slide now, and yet LMDs have shown remarkable resilience. So GDC membership is growing, with more entrepreneurs either starting LMD businesses or diversifying into beneficial products to serve the lower income households. Anecdotally, we've also seen more acquisitions since 2021 than in the earlier years, evidence that bigger companies value LMD's customer relationships, brands, staff, and systems. And looking at our longitudinal data sets, we can see 61% of members actually grew revenues between 2021 and 2023. Median revenues across this whole data set grew on average by 7%. But amongst those that were showing growth, the median growth was 167% over those 2 years. So this tells us two things. First, that growth is possible even in the toughest markets. And second, LMDs have become more efficient at turning scarce financing into sales. As Kudzai has just shown in his example, commercial performance is possible and these businesses are viable, but there is a mixed picture. On the positive side, 77% of LMDs report gross profit margins of above 25%, which is a healthy benchmark. And 54% of the LMDs reported positive operating profits with a median margin of 5%. So these models can be commercially viable even under pressure. Finally, it's worth noting that some of the larger LMDs showing operating losses are those that are investing in carbon projects and will be releasing a dedicated piece of research on carbon financing shortly. So I'll now hand over to Davinia, who will take us a bit more through the trends on access to finance.
Great. Thank you so much, Jessica. I'm Davinia Kogan. I'm the Access to Finance lead here at GDC. So we jump into the access to finance trends. On the next slide, you can see that there's really been quite a drop in the number of transactions that were reported. So grant transactions reported fell by 40%. For debt, it was 54%. And for equity, 75% less transactions in 2023 compared to 2021. And this is really, a number of issues conflating. So the first one is that in 2021, we actually saw quite a big uptick in the number of transactions because there was COVID relief funding, a couple of initiatives that, really increased access to grant and debt transactions. So I guess that 2021 baseline is slightly up on what we were seeing. But there's also just no ignoring the macroeconomic impacts of COVID and what that has meant for, the customers of LMDs, some of the FX issues that have already been mentioned. And then at the same time, we've had, a drying up of grant funding, which Kudzai mentioned previously, and that issue has really just gotten worse. We first started to see that in Europe, and then with the new administration in the US, that problem has sort of gotten worse this year, and obviously that data is not even captured here. So we really see that the most frequently used type of external financing of LMDs is grant capital. 2/3 of the transactions reported were grants. And what does this really mean for our members? Well, it means that when they're not able to access external capital, they must become more self-sufficient. And that is really at the expense of growth and at the expense of impact, which I will show you some data on shortly. So we just jump into the next slide. So what we can see here is the overall volumes of grant, debt, and equity. You can see that debt remained quite stable, but But this is really reflecting that there were really just a couple of big transactions, which means that the concentration of capital is really amongst just a few members. So we saw grant volumes drop by 70% overall. As you can see, very few equity transactions reported. And then there were one or two really large debt transactions in 2023, which sort of kept that number quite buoyant. But of the 50 or so companies that reported raising, just 8 of them raised more than $500,000. This is across all capital types. And 14 companies raised less than 100,000. This was typically, small amounts of grant capital. So yeah, grant capital remains very important for LMDs, given the type of impact that they're trying to have and the cost of reaching those customers. But yeah, there are just so fewer transactions than there were previously. So let's shift now to results-based financing. This was the first year that we really disaggregated grant and RBF data. And what we've seen is that some grant funding, but actually not as much as we thought, has shifted towards providing a results-based financing. A couple of our members, I think, have had really powerful experiences with RBF. We have a member in Uganda, Fenasola, and Yellow as well. RBF has allowed them to scale and reach poorer, rural and more female customers than they could without the results-based financing. We also saw some very interesting data here, the bottom table, which shows that members with access to results-based financing had much higher inclusivity rates than the members that weren't able to access results-based financing. So if you look here, you can see 82% for the companies accessing RBF. If we look at the number of customers below the poverty line, so those with access to RBF had 82% of their customers living below the poverty line, whereas last mile distributors without access to results-based financing reported that 50% of their customers lived below the poverty line. So I think this data really suggests that there is a very clear and likely causal relationship between access to concessional finance. And obviously this is talking about results-based financing, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the same sort of trends for other forms of concessional financing. And I think this just really stresses the importance of concessional financing if we want LMDs to continue to meet the sort of impact metrics that you can see here. We also, had, as part of this process for putting together this report, we held many interviews, and some of the feedback that was shared with us was that, RBFs often favor larger players. So some LMDs really felt left out of the process for accessing results-based financing. Some LMDs also reported that they had felt pushed into riskier markets that were more expensive to serve. And those markets also became sort of unsustainable in the long term. And this really, I think, brings home the point that there needs to be an upfront grant component of results-based financing to put down the infrastructure and reduce the risk for last mile distributors. And also that the business models, the actual unit economics, and the economies of scale of a smaller distributor really need to be considered when designing results-based financing initiatives, rather than assuming some of the larger business models when designing solutions. Okay. So a couple of takeaways from our research. We dive into a lot more detail in the report, But really, I think here, so the investment readiness is obviously essential. There needs to be more investment readiness that is actually tied to investor expectations. So rather than things like putting together a pitch deck, even pitching, while that's really important, if a company is not investable, if it can't repay a loan, that's really not worthwhile. So there needs to be a lot more emphasis on things like unit economics and profitability. And then when we come to trend 2, one thing that is, I think, brings a bit of optimism to the fundraising landscape is we've got more smaller ticket lenders that are using more digital solutions to assess eligibility. We've got a couple of lenders, Green Genset Facility, also Superpower Africa. They're just sort of emerging. And I think, this model could be quite pivotal for LMDs. The issue there is that in order to do a digital, an automated process for due diligence, companies need access to digital records. They need to have, digital financials, sales records, etc. So I think, again, TA around those topics is really important. And then when it comes to FX risk, there's really, just not a lot of options for these smaller tickets. I think really like bringing heads and money together around like what sort of solutions would make sense for small ticket transactions is desperately needed. Okay, now I just wrap up with this slide. So this is, I guess, a framework that really captures all of the takeaways from our interviews. So what we found for the companies that were the most resilient was that they looked at each of these 4 areas, and while they didn't necessarily address each of the different sub areas, they had thought through, like, so for example, with macroeconomic environment, or macro environment, they thought through, okay, like, yes, this is very much out of my control, but what are the things that are within my control? And then they would use those levers to, try and manage risk. So whether that was not taking on a hard currency loan, for example, under FX risk. And we found that the most resilient companies really were adopting at least one thing from each of these 4 areas. So if it was finance fundamentals, they had a really strong understanding of their unit economics. When it came to diversification, they had either diversified their product lines, as Kudzai was mentioning, around the challenges with maintaining like a commercial approach with efficient operations. They were looking at, consumer financing, perhaps through a third party that would really allow them to increase sales. So we'll dive into this a lot more in the report, and I will wrap up there and pass you on to my colleague Ambrose.
Thank you, Davina, for that awesome presentation. My name is Ambrose Mbuvi, an innovation specialist with the Global Distributors Collective, and I'll be taking you through some of the key LMD aspirations that we were able to gather in our work as we're preparing the State of the Sector report. So we can majorly categorize the LMD's aspirations into 4 key aspirations, and I'll start with the first one, which is majorly the LMDs want to sell higher tier solar home systems and cook stoves, but they struggle with affordability and consumer financing constraints. And this is something I think Davina has already touched on as she was capturing some of the funding elements. So what we heavily observed is most LMDs still sell basic products. That's the solar lanterns and some improved cook stoves rather than the higher tier systems. And these basic products are actually quite important because they help them to ensure that the customers experience the technology, as well as to build trust with the customers. And what this does is, along the value chain, it helps some of these customers to climb the energy staircase, because research shows that 50 to 67% of solar customers eventually climb the energy staircase, moving from basic to more advanced products over time. Now, in our interactions and in our interviews with the LMDs, we realized that their ability to sell products that are delivering high level of service is essentially constrained by the affordability of the products towards the end user, as well as their limited capacity and appetite to offer consumer financing. Specifically in the cookstoves sector, the ability to offer higher tier stoves is also linked to whether companies have had access to carbon credit financing, which then would have enabled them to offer higher tier products at affordable prices. Then jumping to the second key aspiration is that LMDs want to sell products, productive use appliances, but the volumes still remain low as LMDs innovate to find the right business models to do so. And ideally, this is quite interesting because in our work, when we started observing this back in our first State of the Sector report, what we essentially realized is only 6% of the LMDs were actually offering PUE systems. But this has been able to jump all the way to 56% as of 2023. And when we look at what has been able to drive this growth is essentially slowly the technology is maturing, and that's the technology of PUE systems is much more reliable, as well as the stronger supplier and donor support when it comes to offering PUE systems. However, the sales volumes still remain low, essentially because of the cost that the PUE systems come with. And from our conversations, what we realized is the LMDs still need to have very specialized teams that have actually been trained and are able to fully install or support the customers to be able to access these PUE systems. Then looking at the third key aspiration, it's around the offering consumer financing or being able to offer financing to our customers or to the customers that LMDs are serving. And what we have realized is financing is a key cornerstone for the success of last mile distributors. And around 72% of the distributors currently offer consumer financing. And this is done mostly through the microfinance institutions or the SACCOs or the round tables or chamas that are within the rural setting. While this works very well for high-value products like the PUE systems, but then it often excludes rural households because the loans here are essentially most of the times cash-based, and they'll always come with very high interest rates. And they also don't allow remote disconnection in case there's a default in some of these facilities. So if you are able to contrast this with the pay-go systems, you'll actually realize the pay-go systems are still far more inclusive compared to these other modes of access to finance. But then again, the distributors still lack the systems, the working capital, or the credit risk management capacity to implement them at a scale. These are some of the areas that then LMDs would actually be able to, or would need support around to be able to fully offer consumer financing. And finally is in working with the rural communities and in serving their customers, LMDs want to go beyond offering warranties and also to offer repair services to extend the product lifetime and to improve the customer satisfaction. And this is ideally because the LMDs recognize that building trust and long-term customer relationships is essential for the success of their business. Today, around 83% of our members or of last mile distributors currently provide warranties, and more are experimenting with repair services. And we actually have a few in this call that have been able to run pilots on repair, such as Solar Aid from Zambia, Kukula Solar, as well as Natfort Energies. But then these pilots have been able to show that repair models not only extend the product lifetime, but they also help the last mile distributor to build customer loyalty and environmental impact. And ideal to be able to at least hear from one of our last mile distributors on how some of these aspirations have been able to present themselves in their work. Let me welcome Joyce, the co-founder of Green Impact Technologies, to be able to briefly share with us what their experience has been, where they're trying to roll out PUE appliances in their market, as well as offering consumer financing. Welcome, Joyce.
Hey, thank you very much, and thank you once again for the opportunity. So my name is Joyce Kwese, country manager, and of course, also co-founder at Green Impact Technologies. So we are a last mile distributor in Malawi and Zambia, working to expand access to productive use of energy technologies. So mainly we are focusing much on the solar fridge distribution and solar water pumps. So from our experience, the productive use of energy products, mainly that have worked best are the solar fridges and the solar water pumps. Why am I saying so? Since we started our operations, we started our business in 2018. We started with the selling of Pico, and then we had to upgrade to bigger solar home systems. So we have been able to diversify from solar home system to other productive use of energy from the feedback that we are getting from the existing clients, and also the baseline studies that we are conducting whenever we try to bring the new product on the market. So this has really helped us to understand the financing options that we can be able to offer on the market to our end users. So when it comes to solar fridges, mainly we target those market vendors who are into the selling of beverages, perishable foods. And for solar water pumps, we have been working with smallholder farmers in groups, individual farmers. So this really has helped these smallholder farmers from purely moving from land-fed farming to irrigation. So this has really helped to increase in yields and also improved food security as well as income, because our passion is to see that they are not only using for consumption, but also they're able to make money out of the technologies that we are providing. So the biggest challenge with this productive use of energy, as already mentioned by other speakers, is affordability. So many households and businesses recognize the value of these technologies, but now the challenge has been the upfront cost. So as Green Impact Technologies, we have been able to address this challenge through provision of trainings to the end users, teaching the proper use and maintenance, and also how to maximize the benefits, and also provision of the warranty service support, and also flexible financing options. So with the financing options that we have been able to provide to the end users, as the pay-as-you-go business model already mentioned, we also provide the lay-buys, and we are working with microfinance institutions. So these microfinance institutions mainly, they buy the product and then they provide the loans at a loan. They provide the product at a loan to the end users. So whatever the interest goes to the end users. So of course, for this one, when it comes to like letting. We can say since we started operations in 2018, we have sold more products on pay-as-you-go business model, and then seconded by the lay-bys, and then loans through microfinance institutions. So from our journey, I see three priorities when it comes to what the government and development partners can help, like the last mile distributors like us. So firstly, the policy and taxation. So I believe that removing or at least reducing the import duties and VAT on productive use technologies would really make these PU technologies more affordable. Like for instance, here in Malawi, the VAT is only removed from the solar panels rather than the whole package of the solar fridges or the solar panels. I mean, the solar water pumps. So it's really challenging, making it this productive use of energy technologies more expensive to the end users. So I would also pray that maybe the development partners should come in, like maybe providing maybe concessional capital or research-based financing. We have we had an opportunity for the past maybe 2-3 years. We secured some funding through result-based financing. It was more like a brilliant financing where there's result-based financing and also debt financing. So yeah, thanks to World Bank, thanks to GIZ, they are indeed coming in, providing the result-based financing to last mile distributors like us. Though it's challenging to like the startup businesses, it all depends on the stage that the business are. So yeah, if we can have more development partner, more investors coming in with the various financing options, that would really help the end users as well as us, the last mile distributors, to be able to provide these technologies. And of course, after sales ecosystems. So I would really request at least to have a support where we can train local technicians and build spare parts supply chains, probably with the suppliers. If the suppliers can come in where we can have a connection and build that knowledge, that expertise among the local technicians, I think that would really help to maintain trust in solar technologies. And
Thank
if I
you
had
so much, Joyce. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to jump in, Joyce. We're running a bit over, so I think a few people are going to have to drop off the call now. So thank you so much, Joyce. I think Jess is going to jump in and wrap up.
And thank you, Joyce. You've done such a good job with the call to actions. I'm going to try and keep my conclusion really brief, because I think the three last mile distributors we've had on the call today have already made really clear calls to actions to the funders, donors and investors in the room. But thank you all for staying with us through today's sessions. Apologies, we've run over on this part of the session a little bit. So I appreciate that if you need to leave and you've got other commitments, you don't want to stay around for the breakout groups. That's thank you for staying for this long. So just, I guess, in conclusion, what does this mean for the future of last mile distributors? Firstly, I think it's clear today that the role of last mile distributors, they do so much more than just sell products. They are market creators, they're raising awareness, they're educating their customers, building trust and creating demand where that just didn't exist before. They're the ones showing a household how to use like the clean cook stove or how mobile money works. But this important role comes at a cost, because LMDs are effectively delivering public goods. And some of the poorest households end up paying more than urban customers because of this, something that we call the poverty premium. Second, kind of conclusion is the recognition and support. So we see that there is growing recognition of last mile distributors' social impact and increasing attention to smaller locally owned and women-led companies But access to finance is harder than ever. Grants are shrinking and investors remain cautious. Despite this, LMDs are remarkably resilient, and many are maintaining or even growing revenues through diversification and efficiency. Our upcoming profitability analysis will take a more closer look at what the drivers of this resilience are, so stay tuned for that piece. And then the third kind of takeaway I just wanted to summarize is the opportunity ahead. The potential for scale remains huge. LMDs are ready to expand into higher tier solar, clean cooking, providing even many types of consumer financing and new product types like productive use of energy. To succeed, they need more tailored funding and smarter support. So I guess the three priorities: first, we need a holistic market building approach. We need to value market creation as much as commercial scale and combine grants, results-based financing, local currency debt, and technical assistance in coordinated ways. Secondly, we need fit-for-purpose finance, so small ticket size local currency debt, patient equity, concessional loans, all supported by innovative investor products and de-risking tools. And at the GDC, we're really excited to be launching in the coming month our investment catalyst facility, which will be looking at how we can support members and investors, provide lower ticket size grants to our companies. And then finally, we need smarter technical assistance, especially for the smaller companies. So support must be tailored, long-term, and demand-driven. That means mentoring, peer learning, flexible expertise, and collective tools that help those too small to access one-to-one support. So in closing, the message is clear. LMDs are vital market builders. They're delivering life-changing products, and they've proven their resilience. But to fulfill their potential, they need better finance, smarter support, and full recognition of their role. So if governments, donors, investors, and technical assistance providers can step up together, we can unlock scale, accelerate market creation, and make a real progress towards closing the global access gap. So again, once again, on behalf of the GDC team, thank you for being part of today's conversation. We are going to go into the breakout groups now. I think there'll be a poll coming up on your screen. So if you can fill out the poll, that's really helpful for our monitoring and learning and trying to make these sessions as valuable as possible.